Hey guys, welcome back to the Girl Gone London channel. Today I am going to bring you along as I try and make my first Victoria sponge cake. Now, Victoria sponge cake was actually named for Queen Victoria, who enjoyed having a slice of this cake with her afternoon tea. Now, the reason it's different from what they traditionally considered a sponge cake is because it involved baking powder, which was invented in 1843. So baking powder came along and suddenly the sponge could rise a lot more, which meant they could incorporate more butter and fats, leading to a richer cake. So it is a sponge cake, sometimes called a Victoria sandwich cake because of the jam and buttercream filling, but that is kind of a brief history of where we get the Victoria sponge cake, named for the monarch and coinciding with the invention of baking powder. I have never made a Victoria sponge cake, but I thought it would be a good video for us all to try it together. So I've got all of my ingredients here, and I'm going to take you step by step through the process. The first thing that we're gonna do is we're going to make the actual basis of the cake, and later on I'll talk about the filling. This is the BBC Victoria sponge cake recipe, so I am hoping that it is basically going to be the best possible recipe and the most authentically British. Now, to start, we're going to need 2 cake tins, about 8 inches or 20 centimeters. I'm going to go ahead and let you see what I'm doing instead of my face. But what we're gonna do is we're going to go ahead and put some baking paper on these. So, there's one. If you don't have baking paper, you can use something like butter to grease it as much as possible. We just don't want the cake to stick. So I'm gonna do the other one so we've got our tins ready. Okay, now let's talk ingredients. So I'm going to use a large mixing bowl, 200 grams of self-rising flour, and I will put the American conversions in the description, 200 grams of softened butter, 200 grams of sugar, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of milk, and we're going to use 4 eggs, but before the eggs go in, we're going to beat them. I also have my electric mixer to do the mixing. So, according to the recipe, we are going to essentially dump everything into one bowl and mix. So, I'm going to get a smaller bowl to do my eggs in. So, crack your eggs into a smaller bowl. And we want to beat these before they go in the main mixture. Okay. Take your big bowl, pour in your flour, your butter, sugar, your eggs, your baking powder, and your milk. Now go ahead and plug in your electric mixer. And we are going to mix this all up until it is combined and smooth. Okay, so the recipe wanted us to have a smooth and soft batter, which I think we have here. I'm going to preheat the oven to 190 degrees Celsius, conversion to Fahrenheit in the description of this video, and then we're going to pour our batter into the cake tins. So, just take this out of here. Get our cake tins ready. And we're doing 2 because it is a layered cake, so we have sponge, filling, and sponge on the bottom. Now we just need to separate this batter into kind of 2 equal parts as best you can and pour it into the cake tins. Okay, so my batter is in my tins, and once the oven is preheated, you're going to bake for about 20 minutes until the cakes are golden and they kind of spring back when you press your finger on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and wait until that's all ready, and I will see you after they're done. Exactly 20 minutes later, my sponges look to be done. I press on it and it kind of springs back up. So the next step is to turn these out onto a wire baking rack and then set them aside to cool completely. So now I'm gonna move these aside and we're going to make the buttercream. So there are 2 parts to the filling of a Victoria sponge cake, the buttercream and jam. I've got apricot jam, strawberries, very popular, raspberry, whatever kind of jam you prefer. But we're going to need to make our buttercream by hand. So I'm simply going to have 100 grams of softened butter, again, conversions down below, and 140 grams of powdered sugar. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm going to go ahead and beat the butter until it's nice and smooth using my electric mixer. That's looking really good to me. So now I'm going to add the powdered sugar. And prepare for a bit of a dust storm in the kitchen. So as you can see, it's starting to come together. As a frosting, I'm just gonna finish this off and then I'll show you how to assemble the cake. Now my cake is completely dry, so I'm ready to put it together. I'm going to take one of my cakes, like that, and I'm going to turn it over so I have the bottom here. I've got my icing and I've got my jam. So I'm going to use all of this icing and spread it all the way around this bottom section. Okay, and now I'm going to top it with about half of this jar of jam. You can kind of do it as thick or as thin as you prefer, but jam is definitely a super important part of Victoria sponge. Now, a Victoria sponge is a naked cake, so we're not gonna frost it on the outside. I'm just gonna take my other piece of cake and go ahead and create your sandwich by laying it right on top. Just like this. Now, to finish off the outside of a Victoria sponge cake, we're going to take some powdered sugar and dust it on top. And there we have it, an authentic Victoria sponge cake. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you guys next time.